Hello, I'm Mary Ann McCabe, a white woman, a retired anthropologist, speaking to you from my home office with many of my favorite books behind me. It's my honor to introduce Elizabeth Bryady as recipient of the Bronislaw Malinowski Award. The other day, I was listening to an interview with Mary Catherine Bateson, talking about the metaphor of jazz to describe the lives of women pursuing career and family life. The metaphor, jazz, implies that women compose their lives through improvisation. There's no script. Listening to Mary Catherine led me to think the jazz metaphor marks your life, Elizabeth. When you finished your PhD at the University of Texas with a dissertation on the changing role of work and migration strategies among Mexican American households in the lower Rio Grande Valley, who would have imagined the course your career would take? There was no script. You improvised, you created, and led anthropology in new and important directions. The central focus of Elizabeth's scholarship and practice, organizational anthropology, has broadened our notions of corporations as resolute oppositions between capital and labor, and introduce concepts to see organizations as cultures, to recognize diversity, and to give shape to possibilities for change. In the 24 years of employment at General Motors, you showed in research project after research project how organizations are not only sites of competition, but also places for coordination. Using ethnographic methods to study corporate cultures, Elizabeth gave voice to employees and developed a model of organizational change that identifies cultural obstacles and enablers for developing tools to implement desired change. Her award-winning book, Transforming Culture, describes how the concept of cultural ideal as a consensus view from employees includes employees in problem solving, directs the change process, and leads to more collaborative relationships within organizations. So your approach to studying organizations has contributed to our understanding of change in organizational practices that benefits employees, their everyday working environments, and more effective functioning of organizations. After a successful career at GM, Elizabeth began a consulting practice, Cultural Keys, oriented to helping companies and nonprofits identify and solve human problems through insights into organizational cultures and strategies for change. A key concept in Elizabeth's work is the idea of silos, the commonly found boundaries in organizational hierarchies, such as different departments, that are difficult to bridge because each silo operates with a contrasting set of values. In her ongoing consulting practice, Elizabeth has applied cross-cultural analysis to help companies and nonprofit organizations bridge cultural understandings among people in different silos, improve communications across silos, and develop effective partnering practices. For example, in a recent study for a hospital where patients were experiencing long wait times, your work helped to streamline the flow of patients through the hospital's siloed organizational structure, and as a result, improve patient experience. The success of Elizabeth's ongoing consulting practice proves how adept she is using qualitative and quantitative methods and working with large global firms and smaller nonprofit organizations in many countries around the globe as they grapple with human problems and search for solutions. Over the course of her career, Elizabeth has shared her knowledge and experience with us through an impressive number of publications, as well as presentations at AAA, SFAA, and other professional conferences. Elizabeth has also shared her scholarship with students through teaching as adjunct professor and visiting lecturer at renowned academic institutions, and by mentoring students through the PhD process. Her text, The Cultural Dimension of Global Business, now in its 8th edition, has proved a valuable resource for faculty and students. Elizabeth has also helped colleagues and students in academic publishing through her editorial work, including positions such as senior editor for the Oxford Research Encyclopedia of Anthropology and the executive editorial committee member for the Journal of Business Anthropology. Elizabeth's extensive service to anthropological organizations reflects her commitment to both practice and the academy. She has assumed many leadership positions with AAA, COPA, the Consortium of Practicing and Applied Anthropological Programs, and SFAA, most notably President of NAPA, Treasurer of COPA, member of the AAA Executive Board, and currently AAA Secretary. The list of Elizabeth's achievements and contributions goes on and on. A recent NSF grant with engineering colleagues at Purdue University, cross-disciplinary collaboration on entrepreneurship at Princeton University, and new forays in presenting anthropology to the public, etc., etc., etc. Your anthropology friends wonder how you do it all, Elizabeth. I think you borrowed a bit of Malinowski's magic to create extra hours in the day. But in conclusion, using the encouraging words you say to us, you are the best. We admire you, love you. Congratulations on receiving the Malinowski Award.
Thank you so much, Marianne. Very kind words that you said about me. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be with you to deliver the 2020 Malinowski Address. I'm a white female with lots of energy. I have short hair and I'm wearing brown glasses. Today I have on a navy and red dress and pearls. And I'm sitting in my alcove, which is a small space in my home where I do most of my work. Before I begin, I have some people that I want to thank. First, my family. My husband and best friend, Mark, who has been the love of my life for over 30 years. My father-in-law, David, and his partner, Jean. My children, Andrew, Kathleen, and Anton. My daughter-in-law, Angela, and granddaughter, Flora. You have all been a strong source of support and encouragement. You've kept me centered and taught me the value of living life to its fullest. I want to acknowledge my colleagues. I could not have accomplished even half of what I did without you. Your wisdom and experience and willingness to teach me what I needed to learn. And I want to recognize Marianne McCabe, who organized and submitted the Malinowski Award nomination materials on my behalf. 12 others were signatories on her letter, and 2 of them, Ann Jordan and Ryle Nolan, wrote additional letters of support. What a wonderful tribute. I am grateful for your belief in me. And finally, a big thank you to SFAA, to their awards committee, board of directors, and president, Sherry Briller, for the role that they played in selecting me as an awardee. I'm truly grateful. It was critical for my career that I had a community of colleagues and friends who were anthropologists, many of whom were SFAA members. I gave my first paper at SFAA in 1986, and here I am giving the 2020 address 35 years later. My presentation is called Driving Organizational Change. I'm not entirely sure what Bronislaw Malinowski would have thought of fieldwork inside and for organizations, but I'm guessing he could have imagined it as a dynamic new frontier for anthropologists. You can see a photo of the Malinowski Award on the left side of the slide. It is designed by Hopi anthropologist, linguist, and artist, Emery Sikakwapua. There are over 7.5 million organizations in the US. I use the term organization to mean a group of people with an overarching collective purpose, including businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies. The two photos show work happening in office and factory settings. Every one of us is associated with an organization in some way, whether as an employee, volunteer, or member. And yet, our track record in understanding them is poor. Organizations are part of our culture. They can improve lives, particularly with the help of anthropologists. Yet they've been largely overlooked by the discipline, both as a focus of study and as a source of careers. Perhaps unsurprisingly, I chose an automotive metaphor. I'll begin by looking in the rearview mirror of my GM car to offer some background and context. The road to my career was grounded in my lifelong interest in different cultures and in my formal training in anthropology. One of my earliest recollections was my mother reading Heidi to me, a children's book about a young Swiss girl who lived high in the Alps. Oh, did I want to meet her. High school language instruction made me a good candidate for a year-long exchange program to France, the second image in the background. There I lived with the Jourdain family, attended a lycée or high school, had to speak French 24/7, and endured the often dreaded rite of passage known as le bac, or the baccalaureate exam. My next road stop was Wheaton College. I was diverted from my plan to become a high school French teacher by an inspirational anthropology professor, Ina Rosenthal-Urey, shown in the center of the slide. Not only did she persuade me to switch majors to anthropology, but she persuaded me to go to the University of Texas at Austin for graduate work, and later took me along to do field work in Michoacan in Mexico, the fourth image. While at UT, my interests first turned to occupational differences, such as janitors, shown in the image of the mop and bucket, and Catholic sisters. I branched out to study farm workers, those settling out of the migrant stream, and the nonprofits that provided emergency support in South Texas. You can see the symbol of the United Farm Workers and Cesar Chavez. This fieldwork was supervised by my dissertation co-chairs, James Brow and Doug Foley, pictured next. In my last year of grad school, I interviewed with GM Research Labs in Warren, Michigan, shown in this last image. GM Research Labs was led by Bob Frosch, who saw the value an anthropologist would bring to the largest corporation in the world. A sociologist, Carol DeWeese, was sent to find one at the AAA meetings without any luck. A friend of mine came back from the sociology meetings having met him and urged me to apply. I convinced GM that if I could talk to janitors and Catholic sisters, I could talk to engineers and designers. A moving truck actually drove my car from Texas to Michigan. There I quickly discovered that a Mazda would not cut it in the Motor City. So I adapted and purchased a Chevy. At GM, I had exposure to a wide assortment of employee-focused projects in the US and abroad. I also worked on projects involving GM partners, including other firms such as Isuzu and BP, and many universities. I spent almost 24 years at GM, but like many others, lost my job during the bankruptcy in 2009. So I decided to hang up my own shingle to help other organizations improve their effectiveness. I called my consulting practice Cultural Keys. Not long after, I saw Fred Gamst. I showed him my new business card and explained that I used my dad's old keys as my logo. Fred knew my dad, an old railroad man himself. When Fred saw the logo, he said, "Elizabeth, do you know that these are your dad's railroad keys?" I looked at him stunned. Don't ever underestimate the knowledge of a fellow anthropologist. The lower part of the slide shows some of the organizational logos where I have consulted in global firms like Mars, Haynes, and SABIC, to nonprofits, to government agencies. Working with organizational clients is not for the faint-hearted. You have to go down many rough roads to try and reach your destination. But I've learned that 3 features characterize or represent the hallmark of anthropological practice: a problem focus, collaboration, and change. A typical organizational project begins when a client asks a question or describes a problem. The anthropologist collaborates with others from the organization to answer the question or address the issue. The results, recommendations, and any interventions or tools position the organization to change, with the expectation that it will lead to a better future. I now want to share examples of these 3 key features. Organizational work starts with a problem focus. The question in this case was, how do we get 3 GM units to produce a vehicle that can be sold around the world? The 3 units were Small Car Group, which was a combination of Chevrolet and Pontiac, Saturn, and Opel. I knew that solving this problem would be tough because GM had a long-standing tradition of autonomy, which made cross-unit collaboration essentially impossible. One day, I was at a 3-hour engineering meeting where conflict was rife. A small team had devoted hundreds of hours to select a single park brake cable routing. You can see the 3 routings on this slide. In analyzing the meeting's transcript, I found that the decision changed 5 times. First, the team members announced their decision to go with the Saturn routing, so the decision was made. Then Opel's chief engineer argued that his guys didn't buy into it, so the decision was revoked. Later in the meeting, the decision was remade, voided, and finally put on hold. No one was optimizing for the corporate good. If your unit didn't like the decision, you would simply appeal to your most senior leader, who would force the global program manager to change the decision. All your senior leader had to do was threaten to leave the program. The result? The decision was reversed, ensuring the global program manager had no authority. Program delays occurred, and rework costs resulted. It took 16 months to make a final decision about a wire. Moreover, the final decision was to use different wires. There are thousands of decisions in a global product program, and they could not even agree on the simplest ones. Trying to agree was costing the program time and money rather than saving it. Of course, the program failed at a cost of 2.2 million vehicles. The failure forced GM to redesign global product programs, drawing from my cultural analysis, recommendations, workshops, and reports. GM knew it had a problem. My analysis helped them fix it. A second prominent feature of anthropological work in organizations is collaboration, similar to community-based participatory research or empowerment evaluation. The highest ranking stakeholder in this second project was GM's head of North American operations. He asked, how do we adapt GM de Mexico's culture for GM's US manufacturing plants? The local stakeholders included the management and union leadership sides of the future plant, as well as members of the workforce who would transfer to it. Another form of collaboration also mattered. The interdisciplinary research team I led, composed of 5 anthropologists and 1 computer scientist. In this first image, you can see Bob Trotter speaking with Joe, an assembly line worker in the body shop. And in the third image, you can see Tracy Mearworth and me speaking with an electrician. Our computer scientists designed the model that characterized the aspirations of the 400 plus employees and leaders with whom we spoke. It is pictured in the second visual. We pointed out that the ideal plant culture model would work best when its 4 elements, plant environment, workforce size and competencies, work practice, and relationships were in balance. This model is embedded in the 10 tools we developed and tested with our union and management counterparts. The tools ranged from a simple workshop to teach employees how to ask open-ended questions to a sophisticated computer game that shows an individual's impact on plant culture. Collaboration both with the client and among the researchers strengthens project outcomes. Change is the third feature of any kind of organizational work. Organizations must continually adapt and change or go out of business. Our job as anthropologists is to assist organizations in planned change rather than simply conduct research on the sidelines. Ann Jordan had a prospective client whom she referred to me. This client, a VP of a Southern hospital, called me and said, "How do we become more patient-centric?" Did I hear her right? I immediately thought, you're a hospital and you aren't patient-centric? I worked with a team of 6 hospital employees for over a year to understand what was going on in that culture. The VP was correct. The first image shows an ER waiting room. Our observations showed little interaction with incoming patients and long patient wait times. Other observations revealed the non-standard use of patient whiteboards in their rooms, shown in the second image, which reflected a lack of a unified approach to patient care. And the third image shows patients piling up as they move through the hospital system, a process referred to as flow. We developed tools to create a healthier hospital culture. One tool, called the Bottleneck Buster Teams, helped reduce bottlenecks, such as between the emergency room and the floors, so that patients do not spend 8 hours in the ER before being admitted. With the implementation of these kinds of tools comes a recipe for effective planned change. Now let's turn to getting hired in organizational settings. What do employers want? The left side of this slide shows that sometimes employers want anthropologists to give them a temperature check on the culture. You know, find out what the culture is like, tell us some interesting things. For example, a recent project I did with Greg Urban, Bill Beeman, and Derek Newbury involved SABIC, a Saudi Arabian petrochemical firm. We found that SABIC's acquisitions in the 2000s, including GE Plastics, did not result in what might be called a successful integration. And sometimes organizations want to learn from a cultural experiment, as is shown on the right side of the slide. Kathleen Crane and Neil Tashima led a team of 8 anthropologists, including Peter Van Arsdale, Ken Erickson, Don Lehman, Tracy Nearworth, Keith Kellersone, and me, as we documented the experiences of NASA engineers shown underneath the NASA logo. NASA wanted to know if it could bring together researchers who did not know each other and who worked at different NASA research centers to work on a first of its kind virtual project. They were to adopt new teaming skills and innovate around an ambiguous goal that no one knew anything about. Wow, what a project. Most of the time, however, employers want outcomes that will improve their operations. I've already talked about the tools or interventions developed in the examples of the hospital blockbuster teams and the GM computer game shown on the left side of the slide. The right side emphasizes that employers often want immediate solutions. Sherry Briller and I devised a new marketing approach for a long-term care community, which included video clips of community members as well as word clouds that portrayed how the community described itself. Now we need to look ahead and around the corners as we imagine the future of anthropological work. To me, the question is not, why should we train the next generation for organizational work, but rather, how do we train the next generation for organizational work? At a minimum, we need to do 2 things. On the left side of the slide, we need to enhance the curriculum. The photo is my former professor advising a student. We need organizational scholarship incorporated into syllabi, class projects done with organizational clients, required internships. And we should broaden the focus of anthropological work from do no harm to actually do some good. On the right hand, we need to offer students professional development to ensure that they have the appropriate training for a range of workplaces. The photo on the right shows 4 employees from a large organization, one of whom is an anthropologist. Anthropology departments should run a required professional development course. Faculty should engage with professional development services and resources on campus. And similarly, practitioners should be invited regularly to lead activities such as workshops and webinars. Now, I'd like you to get in the front seat with me. You and I, must drive the change in organizations. Anthropology is in crisis. That crisis involves jobs, and that crisis is urgent. When 400 applicants are competing for a single academic position, The discipline is demonstrating its inability to adapt to a changing world. Too many programs continue to train students for academic jobs and promote the ideology that the only reputable employment involves securing an academic position. What are we thinking? There are untold numbers of organizations that desperately need us. As a discipline, we need to speak with one voice. We need to restructure and fill gaps in academic programs to ensure that students can apply their anthropology effectively in any workplace. I propose framing the solution in this way: a single voice on student preparation by creating a cross-association anthropology-wide commission with a 1-year deadline. Commission members are recruited from anthropology associations, diverse occupations, and from all subfields. We also include students. They are charged with identifying best practices on training, drawing especially on lessons from current applied anthropology programs. And then they promote job preparation guidelines for all anthropology programs. I will end with the point I made at the outset. Organizations are part of our culture. They can improve lives, particularly with the help of anthropologists. Anthropologists can build their careers in organizations. Now we just need to act to get this commission started. I'll begin by reaching out to SFAA and AAA leaders, among others. I hope you enjoyed the trip.
Hello, everyone. This is Sherry Briller again. I would like to say congratulations to all of our most deserving awardees. As expected, they provided us with wonderful and thought-provoking remarks that reflect the amazing work they do and careers they've had. And now, as we wrap up the awards ceremony, we would like to invite you to join us in the community area from 7:45 to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. There you can meet with the awardees and offer your congratulations virtually. You can also write to them in the chat and Q&A functions if you would like to do that. Our virtual meeting room this evening will be titled Channel 1 Meetup, and we hope to see you there. Thank you so much for coming to the 2020 SFAA Annual Awards Ceremony.